Who the hell still thinks I deserve a birthday card? The words slipped out before Gregory Stone realized he'd spoken. His voice, usually steady and clipped like a man accustomed to command, wavered slightly as he stared at the small yellow card sitting beside his steaming mug of black coffee. He lifted the card. It wasn't fine stationery, just a folded piece of cheap notepad paper. The ink was blue, slightly smudged as though written by a nervous hand. Across the center, in uneven cursive, were 12 words that seemed to cut through the air. I didn't know what to give a man who has everything, so here's a reminder. You're still human. Gregory froze. His thumb brushed the paper's edge, feeling its softness. The handwriting didn't belong to any of his staff, he was sure of that. Every person under his roof followed strict codes, polished manners, efficient silence, no gestures beyond their duties. He slipped the card back onto the table, then stood there, motionless. A movement flickered at the edge of his memory. Last night past midnight he had come down for water. He'd noticed a shadow in the kitchen. Someone standing near the counter, back turned, the faint glow of the refrigerator spilling light across dark skin in a simple gray uniform. Maya Williams. He had thought nothing of it then, just a new maid doing her rounds. But now, the image burned clearer, her shoulders slightly hunched, one hand near the coffee cup that now sat before him. He inhaled slowly, the coffee scent mingling with suspicion. Then he pressed the intercom button on the wall. "Mrs. Clay," he said to the housekeeper, "send everyone to the kitchen. Now." Within minutes, the household staff gathered, 5 of them, lined up quietly by the door. The chef, the gardener, the butler, Mrs. Clay the housekeeper, and Maya at the end, hands clasped nervously in front of her apron. Gregory held up the card. "Which one of you left this?" Silence. A few glances exchanged, but no one spoke. He looked at each of them, one by one, until his gaze stopped on Maya. Her dark eyes lifted just enough to meet his. He stepped closer, voice low but cutting. "You were here last night?" Maya blinked, startled. "Yes, sir. I was cleaning the counters before locking up." You were standing right where this card was found," Gregory continued. "So I'll ask once. Did you leave it?" Her lips parted, then closed again. A soft flush crept into her cheeks. "No, sir," she said finally. Her tone even but her hands trembling slightly. Mrs. Clay, the housekeeper, cleared her throat. "Mr. Stone, if I may," she began. "I did notice Miss Williams lingering near the kitchen after hours this week. Once or twice. I assumed she was looking for something." Maya turned sharply toward her. "That's not true," she said, voice shaking. "I was cleaning. You can check the log." Mrs. Clay interrupted, her tone syrupy, sweet but sharp underneath. "Cleaning doesn't require opening drawers, dear. We all know the rules." Gregory's eyes darkened. "Are you accusing her of stealing, Mrs. Clay?" The woman faltered but pressed on, eager to appear loyal. "Only that it looked suspicious, sir. New staff sometimes misunderstand boundaries." Maya's breathing quickened. "I didn't take anything," she said, her voice almost breaking. "I would never." Gregory raised a hand, stopping her. The room fell still again. He studied her face, her trembling chin, her eyes that refused to look away, her dignity clinging by a thread. "Enough," he said quietly. "All of you can go." The staff dispersed. Mrs. Clay hesitated, as if expecting praise for her vigilance, but Gregory's silence sent her retreating quickly. Maya lingered for a second longer, then turned and walked out. He could hear the soft shuffle of her shoes fade down the hallway. When the kitchen was empty again, Gregory picked up the card once more. He stared at it, then at the empty doorway where Maya had stood moments earlier. It wasn't theft. It wasn't defiance. It was something else entirely. That evening, when the house fell into its nightly hush, Gregory returned to the security console in his study. He replayed the hallway footage from the night before. 6:41 p.m., staff leaving. 9:15, lights off in the kitchen. 11:57, movement. There she was, Maya, alone. She moved quietly, a faint hum audible through the speakers. She reached into her pocket, unfolded a small piece of paper, placed it gently beside the coffee mug, and then paused. For a heartbeat, she stared at it, as though afraid. Then she walked away. Gregory leaned back, silent. The glow of the screen flickered across his face. He could still hear Mrs. Clay's accusation in his mind. Stealing. Misunderstanding boundaries. But that wasn't what he had seen. He saw a woman who left kindness in a house that had none. He reached into his blazer pocket and unfolded the card again. "You're still human." The words seemed to echo in the dimness. For a long time, he sat there without moving, the city lights blinking far below the hill. His life had been built on control numbers, contracts, power. Yet one sentence, written on cheap paper, had shaken all of it. He thought of Maya, her voice trembling, her eyes steady despite fear. No, he decided. She hadn't stolen anything. She'd simply returned something he'd lost a long time ago. And for the first time in years, Gregory Stone felt something unfamiliar stirring behind the armor he'd built, something warm, fragile, and profoundly human. If this moment touched your heart, hit like and tell us where you're watching from. Maybe someone nearby is feeling the same warmth right now. The morning after the confrontation lingered in the air like an unfinished sentence. Gregory Stone stood in his study, back turned to the window, watching the slow drift of fog over the Santa Barbara hills. The card lay open on his desk, its creased edges catching the early light. He hadn't slept much. His mind replayed the footage again and again, Maya's hands placing the note, the pause, the quiet retreat. He had watched it on loop until the flicker of the screen burned into his eyes. The house was awake now. Somewhere down the hallway, the soft clink of breakfast preparations echoed faintly. Ella would be up soon, probably already sitting in the sunroom with her crayons, drawing the same smiling suns and crooked stick figures. She always drew three, a big one, a little one, and a smaller one holding hands. Gregory picked up the card, slid it into the inside pocket of his blazer, and stepped out into the hallway. The marble floors reflected his image as he passed, a man dressed in tailored indifference. But inside, something tightened with every step. He found her in the laundry room. Maya stood over a basket of folded linens, her back to him. She was humming, barely audible, a low, familiar melody that reminded him of late summer nights and front porch swings. Her hands moved slowly, smoothing the sheets, folding corners precisely. She didn't see him at first. He cleared his throat. "Maya." She turned, startled but composed. "Sir, I need a word." "Yes, sir." He gestured toward the small hallway just off the kitchen, private, quiet. She followed, her posture tense but unbroken. When they reached the alcove, he stopped and faced her fully. I saw the footage. Her eyes didn't widen, no gasp, just a slow, inevitable resignation that spread across her face like a tide. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said softly. Gregory studied her, searching for any trace of performance. There was none. "Then why deny it?" "I didn't want it to be about me," she said. "I thought you might just read it, and maybe it would matter more if you didn't know who wrote it." "Megerinst, you thought it would matter more," he repeated, not as a question but a statement. She nodded. It wasn't about credit. Gregory fell silent, hands in his pockets. The hallway buzzed faintly with the hum of the refrigerator down the corridor. Outside, the world spun on as if nothing had changed. Inside, he felt something shift beneath his ribs. "You didn't take anything," he said after a long pause. "No, sir." "But Mrs. Clay said." She saw what she wanted to see. Maya interrupted, then blinked, surprised by her own boldness. "I mean, she assumed." Gregory didn't correct her. He had seen the fear in Maya's eyes yesterday, but more than that, he had seen dignity. Quiet, unflinching dignity. Even when suspicion wrapped around her like a noose. "Why that message?" he asked. "Why me?" Maya took a breath, her voice lowering. "Because you looked like someone who hadn't been spoken to in a long time." "Not really. Everyone around you looks afraid or rehearsed. But people aren't spreadsheets, sir. Even when they try to be." He didn't reply. Maya hesitated. "Am I being dismissed?" Gregory blinked. "What?" "Mrs. Clay told me to expect it, that you wouldn't tolerate sentiment." His jaw tensed. "You're not being dismissed." Maya's shoulders loosened, just barely. She nodded. "Then I'll get back to work." She turned, but Gregory stopped her with a word. "Thank you." "The six." She looked back, brows gently raised. "For the reminder," he said. "It mattered." Maya didn't smile. but her eyes warmed with something unspoken. She gave a small nod, then walked away. Gregory stood alone in the hallway for a moment longer, then returned to the study. He canceled the 9 a.m. investor meeting. His assistant would be bewildered. But for once, he didn't care. By noon, the house had resumed its quiet rhythm. Ella sat by the window drawing cranes in the margins of her picture book. Maya moved silently between rooms, invisible but present, like sunlight in a home that hadn't seen warmth in years. And Gregory, he found himself watching, not in surveillance, not in suspicion, just watching. At one point, from the upstairs landing, he saw Maya kneel beside Ella, pointing at a book with watercolor illustrations of animals wearing tiny hats. Ella leaned into her, not speaking, but resting her head against Maya's shoulder. He felt the ache again. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Clay. "Have you had time to reconsider Miss Williams's place here?" He stared at it for a long second, then deleted the message. That night, he went back to the kitchen at 11:57. He stood in the same spot where the card had been placed. He poured himself a coffee, black, no sugar. He thought of his late brother, his reckless laugh, the way he used to scribble notes on sticky pads and leave them in the most random places. He thought of Ella's first few weeks here, silent, pale, and trembling. And now there were crayons under the sofa and paper cranes on the window ledge. Maybe people weren't spreadsheets. Maybe some things weren't meant to be tracked. He took the card from his pocket, unfolded it again. "I didn't know what to give a man who has everything." He exhaled slowly, ran his thumb over the words once more, and whispered, "Then give him something he forgot he needed." Then he turned off the lights and left the kitchen behind, not in anger, not in confusion, but with a quiet clarity that settled into his chest like the first breath after winter. The days that followed moved like soft ripples across still water barely visible, but changing everything beneath the surface. Gregory Stone found himself adjusting routines he hadn't touched in years. Meetings were rescheduled. Calls went unanswered. For the first time in over a decade, the man who prided himself on punctuality let his calendar breathe. And he watched, not with the suspicion of a man who distrusted his staff, but with the quiet curiosity of someone noticing something he hadn't cared to see before. Maya Williams did not linger in hallways. She never paused to chat or seek praise. Her presence in the house was like sunlight slipping through curtains, subtle but unmistakable. She was always in motion, folding linens, wiping window panes, humming softly in the laundry room as she sorted Ella's tiny socks with a kind of reverence that felt almost sacred. She greeted every member of the staff with soft eyes and a simple, "Good morning." She never raised her voice, never sighed with exhaustion, never forgot a detail. And yet, none of that explained the weight of her presence. What did explain it was Ella. Gregory began to notice the shift not in Maya first, but in his niece. The little girl who hadn't spoken a word in months now waited by the sunroom every morning, eyes fixed on the hallway. The moment Maya appeared, Ella lit up, not dramatically, not loudly, but in the subtle way her shoulders relaxed and her fingers unclenched from the edges of her stuffed rabbit. One afternoon, Gregory watched from the study window as Maya led Ella through the garden. Maya carried a book in one hand and a paper cup filled with wildflowers in the other. Ella toddled beside her, barefoot, curls dancing in the breeze. She didn't speak, but she pointed at birds, clouds, the distant hills. Gregory saw Maya kneel, lift the girl gently onto a stone bench, and begin to read. Her voice was low, steady, filled with warmth. He couldn't hear the words, but the cadence was enough. It was the kind of voice that wrapped around you, told you the world was okay even when it wasn't. He stood there longer than he intended. That night, he passed Maya in the upstairs hallway as she carried folded pajamas to Ella's room. Their eyes met briefly. "Everything all right, sir?" she asked, pausing politely. He almost said yes, but paused. "Do you always read to her like that?" Maya tilted her head. "If she lets me. She seems calmer around you." Maya's expression softened. "She doesn't need to talk. She just needs to be safe." Gregory nodded slowly, then stepped aside. "Carry on." She did, disappearing into the soft glow of Ella's bedroom, leaving the faint scent of lavender in her wake. Downstairs, in the living room, Gregory stood before the fireplace and stared at the framed photo of his late brother and sister-in-law. They had taken that picture in Lake Tahoe during a skiing trip. Both had their arms wrapped around a bundled-up Ella, barely 2 at the time, smiling like the world hadn't yet dared to hurt them. He had taken Ella in not because he wanted to, but because it was the only thing to do, because there was no one else. But parenting wasn't a title, and he had failed to be more than a caretaker. Until Maya arrived. 2 nights later, the staff dined quietly in the back kitchen as usual. Gregory never joined them, he preferred solitude. But tonight, he paused outside the door. He could hear laughter, not loud, not boisterous, but real. Maya's voice rose above the others in a gentle story about how Ella had drawn a picture of a cloud with a frown, and said it looked like Gregory's meeting face. The others chuckled. Gregory raised a brow. Then Mrs. Clay responded, her tone clipped, a little too loud. Some children grow attached to anyone who gives them attention. It doesn't mean it's meaningful. The room fell silent. Gregory felt the air shift, as if everyone had heard something that should not have been said. Maya's reply was calm, but firm. Meaning is what you make it. Especially for a child who hasn't said a word in over half a year. Gregory stepped back before anyone saw him. He didn't know why, but his pulse had quickened. The next morning, a single paper crane appeared on the windowsill of his study, folded from the corner of a newspaper. No name. He picked it up. The folds were uneven, slightly creased, but delicate. He held it between his fingers, then placed it on the edge of his desk. That afternoon, he found himself in the guest wing, standing outside the door of the room Maya used. He hesitated, then knocked once. She opened the door, still in uniform, her eyes calm but surprised. "Sir, I have a question." "Of course." "Ella, the crane drawings, they're hers?" Maya smiled faintly. Some are mine." He studied her. "You do that often? Make things like that for children?" "I used to." Her voice lowered slightly. "Before this job, I worked at a center. I used to teach kids how to fold paper when they were too scared to speak. It gave them something to say without needing words." Gregory nodded slowly. "That's effective." "It's healing," Maya said, "in small ways, quiet ones." He looked at her for a moment longer, then gave a slight nod and turned to go, but her voice stopped him. "Mr. Stone?" He turned back. "Thank you for not letting her believe I did something wrong." Gregory met her eyes. "You didn't." They stood there in silence for a beat longer, and then he walked away. That night, as Ella drifted off to sleep, Maya stayed seated beside her bed, humming a soft tune that had no words. She didn't notice Gregory standing quietly in the hallway again. Watching, his phone buzzed in his pocket. An email from his managing director. "Swiss IPO team requesting update. Timeline shortening. We need you present." Gregory didn't open it. He stared at the child sleeping soundly in the arms of the woman no one had expected to matter. And for a moment, he didn't feel like a CEO at all. He felt like something more dangerous. He felt human. By the end of that week, the house no longer felt like stone. It was still quiet, yes, but not the sterile quiet of discipline, more like the hush of something alive, holding its breath. Gregory noticed it first at breakfast. There was laughter from somewhere soft, unrestrained. He paused mid-step, one hand on the doorway. It was coming from the kitchen. He found Maya at the counter, stirring oatmeal in a small pot while Ella sat on a stool beside her, clutching a wooden spoon much too large for her little hands. The child's face was serious with concentration, lips pursed, eyes bright. Maya was guiding her hand carefully, whispering encouragement in that steady, melodic voice. "Slow, sweetheart. Let the spoon do the work." Gregory stayed in the doorway longer than he meant to. It was the first time he had ever seen Ella engage with anyone this way, focused, connected, present. The sound of Maya's voice filled the space like morning sunlight, warming everything it touched. When Maya noticed him, she froze for half a heartbeat. "Good morning, Mr. Stone." He nodded once, awkwardly. "Morning." Ella looked up then, blinking at him, her spoon dripping oatmeal onto the counter. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them, a curiosity, maybe even trust. Then she smiled, small but real. It was the first time she had smiled at him in months. Gregory cleared his throat. "Carry on," he said quietly. He left before either could see the way his lips curved as he turned away. That afternoon, he canceled another meeting. The board would disapprove, but they always did. He told himself it was to review reports. But truthfully, he stayed because of the way the air in that house had changed. He began to wander more, pretending to read financial updates on his tablet while his eyes tracked the faint rhythm of domestic life around him. Maya hanging linens on the line behind the garden. Maya sitting cross-legged on the rug as Ella pressed stickers into a notebook. Maya laughing once, a sound so soft it startled him. Something inside him, long frozen, began to thaw. Late that evening, as the staff retired, Gregory stood by the kitchen window, watching the lights of Santa Barbara flicker far below. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, a man who had everything and still felt like nothing. Behind him, a faint rustle drew his attention. Maya was there, tidying up the counter. She didn't see him. The sleeves of her uniform were rolled to her elbows. Her hair, usually tied back, had loosened slightly. She wiped the counter slowly, humming that same lullaby he'd heard in Ella's room. He watched her move, a quiet rhythm of care and precision, nothing extravagant, just human. "Maya," he said softly. She startled slightly, then turned. "Sir, I didn't see you. You work late," he said. "Habit," she replied. "Some things feel unfinished until they shine." He almost smiled. "You believe in small perfections." Maya looked down, folding the towel neatly. "I believe small things matter." "Might?" He studied her. "That card, the one you left. You said you didn't want credit. Why not?" She hesitated. "Because people like me don't usually get to say things like that and be heard. And if I had signed it, you might have thought it was overstepping." Gregory's expression softened. "You might be right." She gave a small, knowing smile. "Then it's a good thing I didn't sign it." For a moment, silence settled between them, an ease that surprised them both. When Maya finally left, Gregory lingered by the counter. The faint scent of cinnamon lingered where she had been. On the table, a bowl of fruit gleamed under the kitchen light. There was something humble, almost sacred, about that stillness. He turned toward the security monitor, curiosity pulling at him again. He hadn't checked the footage since the night of the note, but something in him wanted to see her through different eyes, not as the intruder she was once accused of being, but as the quiet force now shaping his world. He cued the feed from earlier that day. Maya walking with Ella through the garden. Maya laughing when the child pointed at a butterfly. Maya kneeling, teaching her to fold colored paper into shapes. He paused at one frame, the two of them sitting on the grass, heads bent together, sunlight spilling across their faces. He froze the image, his throat tightening. He didn't know when the house had started breathing again, but he knew who had given it air. A soft knock came at the doorframe. It was Mrs. Clay, the housekeeper. "Mr. Stone," she said, voice polite but thin. "I hope you don't mind me saying so, but some of us are concerned." "About what?" She clasped her hands primly. "About boundaries. Miss Williams has a good heart, no doubt, but some of the staff feel she's become overly familiar. With you. With the child." Gregory turned slowly. His gaze pinned her. "Overly familiar?" Mrs. Clay faltered. "Just an observation. These things can look inappropriate. Appearances matter." "Sir." He stepped closer. "Do you know what else matters, Mrs. Clay?" "The truth. You made a false accusation once already. Don't make another." Her face pallid. "Of course, sir. Mi apologies." "Dismissed," he said quietly. When she left, the silence returned thicker, heavier. Gregory sat back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He wasn't a man prone to defending others, but defending Maya had felt right. Later that night, unable to sleep, he walked to Ella's room. The door was slightly ajar. Maya sat on the floor beside the child's bed, head bowed, voice soft. "Every crane carries a wish," she whispered. "So we make one every night, until the wish comes true." "Oh," Ella murmured something too soft to hear, half asleep. Maya smiled, placed a paper crane on the windowsill, and rose quietly. She didn't see Gregory standing in the shadows of the hallway. He stepped inside only after she was gone. The room smelled faintly of crayons and lavender. A dozen paper cranes lined the window. their wings glowing pale under the moonlight. He picked one up. A single word was penciled onto the wing. Speak. Gregory held it for a long moment. Then he set it back and exhaled slowly. The house was silent again, but it wasn't the cold silence of isolation anymore. It was the gentle stillness before something changes. And deep down, Gregory Stone knew that something already had. The morning sun was already climbing when Gregory Stone stepped into the upstairs hallway, coffee mug in hand, bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. He was never barefoot until lately. Slippers forgotten, schedule ignored, collar unbuttoned. Something had shifted, and he hadn't even noticed it happen. He paused outside Ella's room, drawn not by duty but by instinct. Her door was cracked open just slightly, the way Maya always left it so light could stream in without waking the child. Inside, the sound of whispered words and the gentle crackle of crayons filled the air. Almost done, Maya said softly. Now fold the tip like a beak there. What color is this one's wish? Ella didn't respond with words she never did, but she pointed. A soft pink crayon. Maya nodded and scribbled the word happy on one wing. Gregory didn't move. He leaned slightly against the doorframe, hidden from view. There were maybe 30 paper cranes now lined in uneven rows along the windowsill and dresser, nestled among storybooks and tiny stuffed animals. No two looked alike. Some were smooth and folded with precision. Others had bumpy edges or were creased too sharply. But all of them had something scrawled on their wings. Hope, safe, dream, sing, mama, smile, remember, and now happy. She picks the word, Maya said suddenly, as if sensing him nearby. I just write it. Gregory stepped forward into view, caught. I wasn't spying. Maya smiled without surprise. You just like the silence better when it says something. He blinked. That hit deeper than it should have. She glanced toward Ella, who was busy trying to balance 2 cranes on her stuffed rabbit's ears. The child didn't even flinch at his presence. She's not afraid of me anymore, he murmured. She never was, Maya said gently. She just didn't know where you fit. Gregory looked at her. And now? Maya tilted her head. Now she sees you. He exhaled, then crouched beside the bed, careful not to disturb the origami parade. Ella looked up at him, then back to her crane. She pointed at the word happy, then to him. Her little fingers tapped his knee once, then returned to folding. Gregory felt something press against his chest, warm and unfamiliar. You taught her this? He asked. Maya shook her head. She taught me. I just paid attention. He turned back toward the windowsill. The light struck the cranes just right, casting their shadows long and delicate across the floor. There was something sacred about it, like a chapel made of paper and love. After a few moments, he rose. Thank you, he said. Not out of obligation, but because it was the only thing worth saying. Maya didn't reply. She simply nodded, then turned back to Ella. Downstairs, the staff bustled with quiet routine. Mrs. Clay gave Gregory a stiff nod as he passed. Her lips pressed so tightly they looked like a seam. He didn't slow. He no longer felt the need to explain himself. At his desk, his phone blinked with unread messages. The Swiss investors were pushing again. The IPO team was expecting updates. His assistant had scheduled back-to-back meetings for the next 3 days. He stared at the screen for a long while, then closed the laptop without touching a key. Instead, he reached into the drawer and pulled out the little yellow birthday card. Still folded, still unreadable from the outside. But inside, it remained exactly the same. You're still human. It echoed louder now. That afternoon, he called an impromptu staff meeting, the kind he hadn't held in years. No agenda, no minutes, just a gathering in the side hall, under the mural of his family crest. The staff lined up, unsure. Maya stood near the back, hands folded, head slightly bowed. Gregory spoke calmly, his voice carrying easily. Effective immediately, he said. Any assumptions made about each other without evidence will no longer be tolerated. Eyes shifted, murmurs stilled. If someone chooses to show kindness, it will not be treated as weakness, nor will it be mistaken for manipulation. Respect begins here. He let that settle before continuing. Miss Williams, he said, glancing directly at Maya, was wrongly accused. That won't happen again. Maya's eyes flicked up, just for a moment. Then she looked away again, respectful as ever. Mrs. Clay fidgeted. No one is dismissed, Gregory concluded, but everyone is now accountable. He turned and walked out, not waiting for applause. There wouldn't be any. That night, as he reviewed documents in the study, something small and white appeared on the edge of his desk. A paper crane. This one wasn't folded by Maya, it was clumsier, uneven, the wings lopsided. He picked it up carefully. Scrawled on the wing, in faint, unsteady handwriting, was a single word. Uncle. His heart stopped. He turned around slowly. At the doorway stood Ella, barefoot in her pajamas, her fingers clutching the hem of her shirt. She didn't say a word. She just waited. Gregory set the crane down, knelt, and held out his arms. Ella ran into them. She didn't speak that night, not with words. But she didn't need to. She had named him, and that meant more than anything the world could offer. The morning after Ella ran into his arms, Gregory Stone sat longer than usual at the breakfast table. He didn't read the paper. He didn't check the market. The coffee grew cold between his hands as he stared out the window at the garden where wildflowers had started blooming again, stubbornly, through late spring frost. She had called him uncle. No one else had heard it, not with their ears, but he had. In the silence of that moment, in the way she ran to him, in the clumsy paper crane folded by tiny hands Ella had spoken, he replayed the image in his mind again and again. The way her curls bounced as she crossed the room, the way her arms wrapped around his neck without hesitation, that single, fragile word scribbled on paper. It was the first time in years he had cried. Not loudly, not with sobs, just a sharp, stinging pressure behind the eyes, and a breath that caught in his throat before it left his lungs. No one saw it. No one needed to. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and said nothing. Now, as the kitchen hummed quietly behind him, Gregory watched Maya through the window. She was in the yard with Ella, crouched beside the little girl, pointing at something in the dirt. Ella was holding a small gardening trowel, her mouth open in quiet wonder. They were planting something. Flowers, maybe. Hope. The scene made him want to walk outside, kneel in the dirt too, maybe even touch the soil with his bare hands. But he stayed back, still learning how to belong in this gentler world. Later that afternoon, as he passed through the hallway near the garden, he caught a glimpse of Ella again. She had wandered from Maya's side, and now sat cross-legged under a lemon tree, folding more cranes from the pages of an old coloring book. Gregory approached slowly, not wanting to break the spell. She looked up when she heard him, but didn't run. Instead, she held up one of the cranes with both hands, offering it to him. He crouched beside her. "What's this one say?" he asked, taking it gently. Ella pointed to the wing. It was written in purple crayon. "Brave." Gregory smiled. "Is this one for me?" She nodded solemnly. His throat tightened again. "Thank you," he whispered. Maya arrived moments later, pausing a few feet behind them. "She's been making one for you every day," she said softly. "Even before she gave you the first." Gregory looked over his shoulder at her. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I wanted it to be hers," Maya replied. "Her choice. Her voice." He nodded slowly. "She speaks without speaking." "She always has," Maya said. "You just had to learn how to listen." That night, after dinner, Gregory returned to the study and found 4 more cranes lined up on the edge of his desk. Each one a different size. Each one a different wish. Kind. Safe. Warm. Home. He sat down, turned off the lamp, and let the moonlight fill the room. This wasn't what he had built his life for, and yet, somehow, it was the only thing that felt real anymore. The next morning, news arrived. A photographer had sold a candid image of Gregory holding Ella's hand on their way into a bookstore downtown. Maya had been walking beside them, her arm stretched toward Ella, who was laughing. It wasn't staged, it wasn't posed, but it was real, and that made it dangerous. By noon, his phone had exploded with messages. The Swiss investors, his board, public relations, his attorney. At 3 p.m., he met with his legal team in the glass-walled boardroom downtown. The room buzzed with anxiety. "This image could jeopardize everything," said Anthony, the general counsel. "We're already under scrutiny from the Swiss firm. They expect full compliance with ethics clauses." "What part of that photo is unethical?" Gregory asked. They'll see it as a conflict, Anthony said. Your relationship with a staff member, especially someone in a caregiving position, complicates the narrative. They'll call it exploitation, power imbalance. They'll spin it any way they want. She's not a scandal, Gregory said. She's the reason my niece smiled this week. That doesn't matter to shareholders, another partner chimed in. Gregory leaned back in his chair, staring out the window at the city skyline. Skyscrapers, metal, men in suits pretending they had control over things that truly mattered. He thought about Ella, her paper cranes, the way she pointed at words instead of speaking them, the way she had written uncle and handed it to him with her whole heart. I'll handle it, Gregory said. The team exchanged glances. Sir? He stood. Draft a response. Say it's a private matter. No further comment. That won't be enough. It will be, he said firmly. Because I said so. The room went quiet. As he exited, he passed a framed plaque in the hallway, Fortune 100, fastest growing equity firm of the year. He paused just long enough to stare at his own name in gold letters, then walked away. Back home, the air was different. The press hadn't reached the estate yet, but it was coming. Gregory found Maya in the library, organizing the shelves while Ella sat on the rug nearby, drawing with broken crayons. I saw the photo, he said quietly. Maya froze. I didn't know someone was watching. You weren't doing anything wrong, he said. She turned to him slowly. That doesn't mean they won't turn it into something ugly. He nodded. I'm handling it. Her eyes searched his face. Will it cost you the deal? He didn't answer, but he didn't have to. Maya's voice dropped. You don't have to protect me. I'm not, Gregory said. I'm protecting us. Ella looked up at them then. She stood, wobbling slightly on socked feet, and approached with a new crane. She handed it to Maya, who unfolded it carefully. One word, scrawled in blue crayon. Truth. Gregory met Maya's eyes. I think she knows what comes next, he said. The headlines came fast. Billionaire's secret nanny, investor board demands clarity on domestic entanglement. From fortune to family, has Gregory Stone lost focus? Who is Maya Williams, the woman behind the paper cranes? They were as cruel as they were invasive. Photos of Ella's tiny hand in Maya's, blurry zoomed-in shots of the estate's gates, even speculative pieces digging into Maya's background, former childcare worker, community center volunteer, no criminal record, modest income, unusual proximity to power. Maya stayed quiet. So did Gregory. But silence had a sound. Inside the house, it hung like fog over a field, cold, weighty, and thick with tension. Gregory had never been the type of man to worry what the world said. His money, his name, his reputation, they were enough armor. But this was different. This wasn't about business deals or public perception. This was about something far more fragile. It was about Ella and Maya and the thin, golden thread that connected the three of them, now woven quietly through paper cranes in quiet rooms, bedtime stories and truth scribbled in crayon. At breakfast, Gregory arrived late. Maya had already set Ella's plate, and the child sat quietly drawing a sun with 7 rays. 7 because that's how many letters were in Maya. Do you want me to go? Maya asked gently as he entered. Gregory paused. Do you want to go? She looked down. I want her to be okay. That's not an answer. Maya's voice dropped. I don't want to run. But I won't stay. If staying makes things worse. Gregory looked at Ella. The girl was humming quietly, unaware of the war outside her bubble of safety. You being here doesn't make anything worse, he said. What people say, it doesn't matter. Maya met his gaze. You and I both know that's not true. He didn't argue. Later that day, Gregory called an emergency meeting with his board remote, private, off the books. He sat in his office with the paper crane marked truth in his palm, rolling its fragile wings between his fingers as faces flickered onto the screen. Anthony spoke first. We've received a direct inquiry from the Swiss delegation. They're asking for clarification on your personal relationship with Miss Williams. Gregory didn't flinch. There is no personal relationship. Is she still employed? Another voice asked. She is. A pause. Then the optics are your problem. This is not a moral discussion, Gregory. It's procedural. Investors see instability, unaccounted emotional influence, a child involved. It raises questions. Ugh. Gregory stood, walked slowly to the window. The garden below looked peaceful. Maya walking with Ella, their steps in sync. Two people who didn't owe the world anything, but were now being dissected by it. He turned back. "Gentlemen," he said slowly, "what do you know about losing your humanity in service of your success?" The screen was silent. "I built this company from the ground up. I followed every rule, hit every target, signed every line where they told me. But the truth is, none of that gave me peace." He picked up the crane, until a little girl folded a piece of paper and reminded me I was still alive. "Amurmur. I will not fire Maya Williams," he continued. "I will not lie, and if this IPO falls through because of that, then maybe it wasn't worth it. Gregory, I'm done here." He ended the call. The screen went black, and Gregory sat down, lighter than he had felt in years. That evening, he told Maya everything. They sat in the garden, just the two of them, watching the last of the sun slip below the lemon trees. "I didn't ask you to defend me," Maya said softly. "I didn't do it for you," Gregory replied. "I did it because for once, I want to live a life I'm not ashamed to explain to a child." She didn't smile. Not right away. But her eyes glistened. "What happens now?" "Whatever comes," he said. "We face it." Ella ran toward them then, clutching something in her hands. Another crane. She placed it in Gregory's lap, breathless from her run. He unfolded it. This one had no word, just a small, uneven heart drawn in red crayon. He looked at Maya. She looked at him. "I think she's telling us to stop worrying," Maya said. Gregory nodded. "She's wiser than both of us." That night, as Maya tucked Ella into bed, she noticed something different. The girl whispered something. Not a word, but a sound. She hummed. Not a tune, not just a hum, but something resembling language. Maya leaned in. "Sweetheart." "What did you say?" Ella looked up and touched Maya's cheek. "Ma." It was breathy, barely audible, but it was there. Maya's hands flew to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes. She nodded quickly. "I hear you, baby. I hear you." From the hallway, Gregory had heard it too. He stood motionless, heart pounding. Then he walked away, because that moment belonged to them. Tomorrow would bring noise, headlines, possibly more consequences. But tonight, the paper cranes on the windowsill fluttered in a warm breeze, and somewhere, a child had spoken. The house felt different the next morning, not just quieter, but softer, as if every room had been wrapped in velvet overnight. Even the sunlight filtering through the windows seemed warmer, gentler. Gregory awoke earlier than usual, jolted not by his alarm but by something he couldn't name. A sensation. A pull. He sat at the edge of the bed, rubbing the back of his neck, staring at the faint imprint of a folded paper crane resting on his nightstand. Courage written in purple ink. He didn't remember placing it there. Maybe Eja had, or Maja. He couldn't bring himself to ask. Instead, he stood, dressed without looking in the mirror, and made his way to the kitchen. Maya was already there. She didn't turn when she heard him, but he saw her shoulders tense for half a breath before relaxing again. "Coffee's fresh," she said, stirring gently at the stove. Gregory poured a cup, the silence between them filled with things neither could name yet. It wasn't tension, it was memory. "She said it," Maya whispered suddenly, as if breaking something sacred. Gregory turned. "I know." Maya looked at him, eyes bright. "You heard?" He nodded. "I didn't want to intrude." "You didn't." He didn't know what else to say, so he just stood there, mug in hand, watching her hands as she plated slices of fresh orange beside a little stack of Ella's favorite toast cinnamon raisin. Crusts trimmed just the way she liked it. "I've never heard her say anything before," Maya said, her voice shaking slightly. "Not even a sound that close to a word." "She said it to you," Gregory said. "That means something." Maya's eyes met his. "Everything," she replied. They both smiled, and then Ella entered the room, a little storm of curls and bare feet, dragging her rabbit behind her. She climbed onto her stool, yawned, and looked at both of them with sleepy, curious eyes. Gregory leaned down and kissed the top of her head. "Morning, sunshine." Ella reached for her toast without a word, but not without awareness. She glanced at Maya, then back at Gregory, then grinned. Not a forced smile. A knowing one. Maya sat beside her, folding a napkin into a triangle, then into a tiny square. Want to make one today? Ella nodded. Gregory sat too, and sipped his coffee. For the first time, it felt like a family. Outside the estate walls, the world had not softened. A new article had surfaced. This one more malicious than the last. A former housekeeper fired 2 years ago claimed Gregory had blurred the lines between professionalism and favoritism. She had no proof, no first-hand knowledge, but it didn't matter. The story spread. Gregory's legal team called 3 times before lunch. His assistant left urgent voicemails about the IPO council demanding clarification. The narrative was spiraling. Public interest was rising. Take a vacation, Anthony suggested. Disappear for a few weeks. Let it die down. Gregory leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. Disappearing won't protect anyone. It'll only confirm the story. And fighting it? He looked out the window toward the garden, where Maya was once again guiding Ella's hand across a page, helping her trace the letter M. Fighting it is the only honest thing I've ever done, he said. Anthony sighed. Then you'd better be ready for war. That evening, Gregory gathered the household staff in the main foyer, even Mrs. Clay. I know the press has been outside, he said. I know you've seen the stories. Some of them include this house. Some of them include people you know. A few heads bowed. 1 or 2 exchanged glances. I want to be clear. Maya Williams is not leaving this home. She has done nothing wrong. She is not the source of shame. She is the reason this house has come back to life. No one spoke. Then someone clapped, softly. It was Ben, the gardener. Then one of the kitchen staff. Then the driver. The sound grew not loud, but steady. Real. Mrs. Clay said nothing, but her lips thinned, and she turned away before anyone could read her face. Gregory found Maya later that night in the music room, dusting an old piano. Why don't you ever play? He asked. She blinked at him. How do you know I do? I hear you. Sometimes. At night. She smiled faintly. It helps me think. Play something now? Maya hesitated, then slowly sat at the bench. She placed her fingers on the keys and began a soft, lilting melody, part lullaby, part hymn. The notes were uneven at first, like a memory unfolding, then steadier, deeper, like courage finding its footing. Gregory closed his eyes and let the music carry him. When she finished, neither of them spoke. From the hallway came the soft rustle of tiny feet. Ella appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. She walked up to Maya, leaned into her lap, and said, quietly, clearly, "Love you." Maya gasped. Gregory's heart clenched. Ella turned, looked up at him, and whispered, "Love you, too." The world could rage outside. But in that room, in that moment, nothing else mattered. The rain arrived before dawn sharp. Insistent droplets tapping against the tall windows of the study, like impatient fingers. Gregory sat awake in the leather chair near the hearth. The fire now only embers. He hadn't slept, not really. The piano melody still echoed in his ears, but it wasn't the music that kept him up. It was the word, love. Ella had spoken it not once, but twice. Not a whisper between folds of paper, not a hum in the dark, but words. Deliberate, soft, brave. He couldn't stop hearing it, couldn't stop feeling it. Across the hall, he heard the creak of the stair railing. A door opened. Light footsteps. Then Maya's voice, low and soothing, drifting down the hallway. Shh, it's just rain, baby. Ella had never liked storms, but she wasn't crying, just fidgeting, waiting for comfort. Gregory stood and stepped into the hallway. From the shadows, he saw Maya kneeling beside Ella's bed, pulling the blanket up to her chest. The girl reached out, her hand curling around Maya's wrist, grounding herself. I'm here, Maya whispered. Always. Gregory felt something crack open inside him. A part of himself that had learned to function without warmth, without softness. He turned away before they saw him and returned to the study. Later that morning, the storm worsened. Not the one in the sky, the one on the news. Gregory Stone's hidden family, the nanny, the child, and the crumbling empire. Anonymous source claims improper conduct inside the estate. Is this the end of Stone and Hartwell before the IPO? Images. Headlines. Wild speculation. Anthony's voice rang through the phone like a fire alarm. We have to respond. Now. Not just a statement, You have to speak directly, publicly. No press conference, Gregory replied. I'm not putting Maya or Ella in front of cameras. Then a written letter. Something published. Something honest. Gregory pinched the bridge of his nose. They don't want the truth. They want spectacle. Anthony paused. Then give them a story they can't ignore, but on your terms. Gregory hung up without a word. He knew exactly what he needed to do. Maya was in the greenhouse, trimming basil when he found her. The rain had turned it into a glass cathedral, each pane streaked with silver. The scent of damp earth and rosemary filled the space. Are you okay? She asked when she saw his face. No, he admitted, but I will be. She set down the shears. What's happening? They've decided you're the reason I'm human again, which apparently makes you dangerous. Maya's brow furrowed. That's not fair. No, Gregory said, but it's true. She shook her head. What are they saying now? He didn't answer right away. Then, softly, they've called you the woman who dismantled a billion-dollar firm with bedtime stories and paper cranes. Maya blinked. That's oddly poetic. I thought so too. He stepped closer. But they're coming for you. I won't let them. I've decided to publish a letter. My own words. My truth. And I'm going to name you in it. She stiffened. Gregory. He raised a hand. Not like that. Not scandal. Not spin. Just truth. What you've meant to Ella. What you've done for this house. What you've taught me. Maya searched his face. They'll tear it apart. Let them, he said. I don't want to hide anymore. She swallowed hard. Then let me read it before you send it. You will. They stood there for a long moment. The rain whispering against the glass, neither of them moving. That night, he wrote the letter. It wasn't long, just a page and a half. He spoke about his grief losing his brother and sister-in-law in that car accident. The silence that swallowed his home after. The way Ella stopped speaking. The way he stopped feeling. And then Maya. He wrote about her without embellishment. Her calm presence, her strength, her fairness, how she never demanded respect but earned it anyway. He described the first time Ella placed a paper crane on his desk. The day she whispered Ma into the dark. He ended the letter with this. If the price of decency is the approval of strangers, then I will pay it in full. Because if being human means protecting the people who've saved your soul, then let them call me guilty. He signed it simply, Gregory H. Stone. Maya read it the next morning in the sunroom. The light had returned after the storm, golden and tentative. She sat in silence as she read, one hand over her mouth. When she finished, she looked up at him. This will change everything. I hope so, he said. For better or worse? He shrugged. That's up to the world. She folded the letter gently. Then let it see what real courage looks like. That afternoon, the letter was published online and in print, the New York Times, the Washington Post, even Forbes. Within hours, the internet split in two. Half praised him, the other half called for his resignation. But Maya, she stayed. Ella drew a new crane that night. It was silver, made from old wrapping paper. On its wing, she wrote her third word. Stay. The letter had cracked open something far larger than Gregory could have imagined. By the following morning, Number the Stone letter was trending across every major platform. Talk shows dissected every sentence. Editorials called it reckless, brave, calculated, and human, all in the same breath. Pundits argued over whether it was a love letter, a confession, or an act of corporate suicide. But inside the estate walls, none of that mattered, because something else was happening. Ella was speaking, not often, not loudly, but deliberately. Each morning brought a new paper crane, and with it, a word, sometimes scribbled, sometimes whispered, but always real. Brave, safe, stay, more, words that stitched meaning into the silence she'd lived with for years. Maya kept each one, lining them in a glass display case Gregory had installed in the music room, a museum of healing. The cranes became sacred. Even the staff, many of whom had once side-eyed Maya with skepticism, now treated her with quiet reverence. The gardener brought her lemons from the trees each morning. The cook began asking her opinion on the menu. Even Mrs. Clay had started greeting her, albeit with measured nods and tight lips. Something had shifted. Not because of the letter alone, but because of the way Gregory had stood in it. With Maya. For Maya. Still, storms never pass without a second wind. One afternoon, 2 uninvited guests arrived at the estate gates. Reporters. They weren't there to yell or provoke. They came bearing questions, letters from media outlets, even flowers for Maya. Just 5 minutes, one called through the speaker, to show people she's more than a headline. Gregory refused them. But Maya, she stood by the window in the main hall and watched them for a long moment. "I don't think they want to harm me," she said quietly. Gregory turned from the fireplace. "That doesn't mean they won't." She crossed her arms, eyes narrowing just slightly. What if silence isn't protection anymore? He walked toward her, voice low. "You don't owe them anything." Maya looked up at him, steady. "Maybe not, but maybe the next little girl like Ella. Maybe she needs someone like me to be seen." That stopped him. He studied her, this woman who had entered his life through the back door, carrying nothing but humility and a quiet fire. "You want to speak?" he asked. "I want to be heard," she replied. That evening, Maya recorded a short message just 3 minutes long. No makeup, no press team, no staging. She sat on the piano bench, Ella beside her, one tiny hand resting in hers. "My name is Maya Williams," she began. "I'm not a scandal. I'm not a mystery. I'm a woman who cares for a child, and who found a home where I least expected it." She didn't cry, but her voice trembled once when she spoke about Ella. She didn't need a therapist. She needed safety, stillness, someone who wouldn't walk away when she stayed quiet. Then she looked directly into the camera. "And yes, I love this child." Fiercely. As if she were my own. "And if that love offends you more than greed or corruption, then I can't help you." It was published that night, and it changed everything. The response was immediate. Messages poured in from teachers, nannies, foster parents, adoptive families, trauma counselors. "Thank you. We see you. She sounds like me. I wish someone had said this when I was young." Even the media shifted. Not all, but some. One paper published a profile titled, "The Woman Who Helped a Child Speak Again Without Saying a Word." Another ran, "From Maid to Mentor. Maya Williams rewrites the narrative." Still backlash lingered. But now it came with resistance. For every cruel comment, there were 10 in her defense. For every whisper of scandal, there was a louder shout of solidarity. And in the center of it all, Ella thrived. She spoke her 4th full sentence 2 days later while sitting in the garden. Maya was reading aloud from a picture book, her voice soft under the trees. Gregory sat nearby, watching from a bench, pretending not to eavesdrop. Ella tapped Maya's hand and pointed to a red flower blooming by the path. She said, "It's a happy red." Then she laughed. A real laugh. Maya froze. Gregory stood. "You heard that, right?" he asked. Maya nodded, eyes glistening. "I did." Then she looked at him, a spark in her smile. "She's writing her own story now." Gregory exhaled. "And we're just lucky to be in it." That night, the estate was still. The press had retreated. The markets had calmed. Gregory stood at his bedroom window, gazing at the glass greenhouse in the distance. In its glow, he saw Maya's silhouette checking the plants, barefoot, humming something familiar. The paper crane marked, "Stay Still," sat on his nightstand. But next to it now was a new one. Green, tucked there by Ella that evening. It said, "Begin." Gregory picked it up. He didn't know what would come next. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid to find out. Gregory found himself walking through the estate at sunrise, coffee in hand, barefoot on cool tile floors that once felt like stone beneath his feet. Now they felt lived in. Real. The air smelled of lemon blossoms and dew, and far off in the greenhouse, Maya was already awake again. She'd become a rhythm in this house, not just someone who worked in it, but someone who moved with it. She hummed softly as she watered the basil, unaware that Gregory watched from the kitchen window. He smiled to himself. The world outside hadn't stopped. But for now, it had quieted. The letter, the video, the media storm still active. Yes, but distant. Like thunder in the next county. More importantly, Ella was blooming. At breakfast, she slid into her chair with a casual confidence Gregory had never seen before. She had on her little green sweater, the one Maya had knitted during a night of storms, and her hair was tied up in a messy half bun, held together with a pencil. Maya passed her a plate with toast and strawberries, and Ella whispered a tiny, clear, "Thank you." Maya froze. Gregory blinked. Ella didn't notice. She just ate. Like this had always been her way. Gregory leaned forward. That was new. Maya was still processing. That was hers. They shared a look of pride, of disbelief, of awe. Later that morning, as Gregory sorted emails in the study, he received a calendar reminder from his assistant. Meeting. Zurich delegation. Re Stone. Hartwell IPO final terms. He stared at it for a long moment. Everything had shifted since the original IPO plan. The Swiss investors had gone quiet after Maya's video went viral. No official cancellation. No confirmation either. And suddenly, Gregory didn't care. The meeting started. Gray-suited men filled his screen. They were polite, rehearsed, careful with their language. One of them spoke, a Mr. Luthi. "Mr. Stone, thank you for joining. We are aware of recent events, and how shall I say, public developments." Gregory kept his voice even. "I'm aware. There have been concerns among the board regarding attachments, emotional involvement. You mean the child who lost her parents? Or the woman who helped her speak again?" Luthi cleared his throat. "We simply want assurances that personal matters will not impact the firm's direction." Gregory leaned forward. "Gentlemen, the personal is the direction." A long silence. "We were under the impression you built this empire on logic," Luthi said. "I did," Gregory replied, "and it nearly cost me everything that matters." Another man on the screen, younger, leaned in. "Then what are you building now?" Gregory smiled, slow and sure. "A legacy that matters beyond profit margins." "No." The younger man nodded once. Luthi didn't. The call ended with a promise of reconsideration, but no guarantees. Gregory closed his laptop. No panic, no regret, just clarity. That afternoon, Maya and Ella were in the guest room, sorting through Ella's growing collection of drawings. Paper cranes, too delicate to hang now, were laid out across the